Hello, guys. Today we are going to learn about power sharing, what it means, and why it is needed. Before we begin the lesson, let us do a small exercise. Take out a notebook or a piece of paper and write down the answer to the following questions as briefly as possible. Don't worry, this is not a test. Consider your school and try to write down the answer to these simple questions quickly. Do you think that all the decisions in the school is taken independently by the principal? Second question. Who do you think is responsible for making policies and programs for the school? The third question. Who is responsible for the implementation of policies and programs in school? And your last question. Who is responsible for taking disciplinary actions? That's done. Now let us begin the lesson. What is actually power sharing? In simple terms, power sharing is a system of political arrangements in which power is shared among different organs of the government, among different levels of the government, among different social groups, and among different political parties, pressure groups, and movements. It is the concept of providing a permanent share of power in the government, different communities, or regions. The idea of power sharing was first conceived by Montesquieu, the 18th century philosopher, who believed that powers should not be concentrated in the hands of a single person who tends to become authoritarian. In his book The Spirit of Laws, Montesquieu called the idea of dividing government power into three branches: the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. In his theory of the separation of powers, he thought it important to create separate branches of government with equal but different powers to prevent the government from placing too much power with one individual or group of individuals. The idea was very positively taken by people in France and in many parts of Europe. It has inspired the people of France to challenge the authority of the king, which ultimately led to the beginning of the French Revolution. Let us now understand the need for power sharing. To understand the need for power sharing, let us take up two case studies. Belgium, a diverse country with a home to different nationalities speaking different languages, and Sri Lanka, a beautiful island country located to the south of India. Let us first understand the case of Belgium. Belgium is a European country with a small but complex population. The country is physiographically divided into three regions: the Flemish, Wallonia, and the capital city of Brussels. The population of Belgium consisted of 59% Dutch speaking people, 40% French, and 1% German speaking people. The capital city of Brussels had 80% people belonging to the French community, and the Dutch made up only 20% of the total population in the capital. Even though the French speaking people were a minority community in Belgium, they were relatively rich and powerful. This made the Dutch speaking community jealous and angry. From the 1950s to 1960s, there were tensions between the two communities because of these differences, which created conflict, tension, and rivalry between them. To resolve the conflict and establish peace, the Constitution of Belgium was amended four times in the period between 1970 and 1990. Finally, it came up with a solution where they decided to accommodate both the communities by equally sharing the powers between them in the central government and the state government. The Constitution granted equal representation to the Dutch and the French in the central government. They also set up a separate government in Brussels, giving equal representation to Dutch and French communities. At the local levels, they set up a community government which was to be elected by respective communities who would be responsible to resolve their own local issues. Now let's move on to Sri Lanka and check the problems that they had to face after their independence as they set up a newly elected government. Located in the south of India, this beautiful island country has a diverse population of Sinhala speakers who constituted 74% of the total population, and the Tamil speakers who made up for only 18%. The Tamils in Sri Lanka were divided into two categories: Sri Lankan Tamils, who were the natives of Sri Lanka, and Indian Tamils, who were migrants from India during the colonial rule. Sinhala were mostly Buddhists and spoke Sinhala as their language. Tamil speaking people were either Hindus or Muslims and were in minority. After independence, the democratically elected Sri Lankan government made a series of reforms to establish Sinhala supremacy. They declared Sinhala as the official language and Buddhism as the state religion. They gave preferences to Sinhala speaking people for all government positions. They preferred majoritarianism, as a result of which problems continued, which led to the formation of militant groups demanding equal rights for the Tamil speaking Indians in all spheres of life. The liberation of Tamil Tigers Ilam carried out violent protest and militant actions that created confusion and chaos in the country, and it is effective even today. And the country is troubled by so many issues. Thus, we can say that by accommodating and sharing powers equally among the different communities, Belgium was able to establish peace. Sri Lanka, on the other hand, was torn by conflicts as they continued with majoritarianism, which failed to establish the true essence of democracy, that is, power sharing. Therefore, we can conclude by saying that power sharing reduces the possibility of conflict between social groups, it ensures the stability of political order, and also guarantees the true spirit of democracy. Hello, guys. Today we are going to learn about power sharing, what it means, and why it is